you. Thanks for tapping into another episode of Untapped Keg, a place where we look at different perspectives into sobriety and mental health so that you can take something and implement it into your own life, where we believe there's only one right way to sobriety, and that's the way that works for you. I'm RJ Zimmerman, and I'm honored to be joined today by Michele Rose Fortin, author, mother, grandmother, someone who has over 21 years in recovery, and also a fellow breaker of generational cycles. How are you doing today, Michele Rose?
I'm doing great, RJ. Thank you so much for having me.
So when we spoke about coming on the podcast, there were a lot of really interesting topics that you touch on and things that I've also kind of talked about in the past on some different episodes, and I've talked with other people about. And I'm really excited to get into that. But first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your journey to writing books and, breaking these generational cycles?
Sure, I'd be happy to share that. Excuse me. As someone that grew up with in generational dysfunction and alcoholism and child abuse, it definitely takes many people down a very dark road because they don't know how to process the feelings, the emotions, the shame, the guilt. And for myself, I found that to be true. I couldn't get out of my own way of figuring out how to solve that, being so young. And so drinking became the go-to suppressor for that. Um, and as it took me deeper and deeper into that dark hole of addiction for 25 years, I mean, it just progressed on from one substance to another, and jail, multiple rehabs, um, overdosing, seizures. I mean, it was just an ugly, ugly world. And when I finally was able to escape it, I realized I did not want that life for my own children. And as I was finally coming out of my years of addiction, my ex-husband, who, was left to take care of our children because I just checked out on life, picked up where he left off. And my children's father died at 51 because he just embraced himself back into that addiction so deeply. And I began explaining to them the ugliness of that world. And they were still fairly young, early 20s. And they could see that maybe there was something mom was saying, even though she was gone all those years, was right. And I realized in that maybe writing my story out would help other kids avoid that trauma by being empowered to share their journey. And I had only intended on writing one book when I started. So, yeah.
That's amazing to come to that understanding that sharing your journey is really powerful, and it can lead you down some really incredible roads that you didn't even realize was possible. And that's something that I've been very passionate about, is getting people to open up, and whether you want to share it on a platform or not, but just sharing your story. And once you get it off your chest, it no longer really weighs on you. And that is powerful all on its own. You touched how in your journey about the rehab stints, and your newest book is tailored around rehabs and specifically the aftercare that comes after. What is it about the aftercare that is something that you're passionate about?
Well, it's a really great question. And within the last year, even SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, has recognized or revealed that peer specialists are the most effective way in reaching those with addiction issues. That someone that's been there, done that, can understand someone that feels that shame and that guilt, and can help them, as you were just saying, share that and unburden themselves so they can move forward and have a happy life, right? A successful life, untethered from that old myth of, oh, you're going to always be an addict. Well, no, because my addiction was only to suppress the trauma that I had in my childhood, from whatever that form was, whether it was being ostracized by the school bully or whatever. So building a coalition of peer specialists to bring that kind of a dynamic into the community in an aftercare setting, to, I don't want to say replace the socialization of AA and NA, but into more of a group therapy format that could help reach more people that can't afford to go to rehab.
Yeah, and that's where you see a lot of the power of, honestly, and the rise of podcasts when it comes to the recovery space and people who share their journey and creating communities. And that is what has been fantastic coming out of, honestly, out of COVID. And you've seen these Zoom rooms really open up and people being able to lean on one another. Um, I just recorded an episode, that the lady talked about being a part of This Naked Mind and how they started a group and now they have weekly meetings on two different apps from this group, people all across the world. And so now you get to open that up to others, and it doesn't necessarily cost anything more than your time of going onto Zoom or another app and really embracing that sense of community that does get involved.
Absolutely. And so many people have told me that they just don't connect in the AA or NA space any longer. It's just too, I don't want to, they just don't like that atmosphere anymore. It just doesn't work for most people. I don't know if it's because it's such the platform originally is, 85 some years old, and it just doesn't work in this environment, as well as you're saying, Zoom and other apps that have that more community.
Yeah. And one thing that I've noticed too when it comes to that is there's two different approaches. And I think that this is true in the mental health realm as well, where you have kind of, a fear or you need to heal or else this is happening out there. And then the other approach is a lot of the embracing and compassion and grace. And you, the balance is there. Some people it works, right? It works to have the different kinds of motivation. Other people, it's taking that pressure off that really helps people to kind of move along. So there's there's pros to both models, there's cons to both models, but having the choices is really, really something that's important. And it's something you talked about earlier with the having the peer support specialists that can share their story in a responsible way and be there to give people the space to really talk about things that they're so worried about that has really kept them where they are in life and stopped them from moving on. That is something that is really powerful as well.
It is. And there's so many different ways into the communities that are truly lacking in the ability to even attend any kind of a meetings, and being able to move a new coalition or peer networking force into places that, even the AA community or NA community just can't tap into. I mean, even if you take peer specialist and do a group why there's people feeding in a homeless shelter type atmosphere, and to give them just that little seed of hope. I mean, so much can grow out of just the smallest gesture, as you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And that seed is so that to me, that's the metaphor that started an understanding of my self-discovery and mental health journey, aside from not drinking and being sober, where that seed was planted and it took a few years, but because that seed was planted, it's really grown into this enormous tree that just branches off all over. And it's allowed me to be honest with myself. It's allowed me to get roots deep inside myself, so that now I'm a lot more steady when it comes to challenges in life. When you talk to other people about um planting these seeds, and peer support specialists kind of trying to gear up there, what are you often met with when you're really bringing this forward?
Well, that too is a very good question. I believe that moving this new platform or mindset into a community that is so entrenched in the familiar, right? Because change is
Yes.
hard for everybody, and the pushback from um, those in power, those with degrees, those that believe that, well, only we can, treat you. Okay, but you've never been there, so how can you really say you understand how I felt? Um, so trying to break that barrier has been a bit difficult, and but I do see that it is starting to find its way into different places and pockets. I know there's a a a group near me here where I work in with the opioid task force in the county just down the road. And they've got a group of peer specialists that goes into the jail down there and speak with people that are mostly first time offenders, to again plant that seed. But they do have, some training in mental health formats where they can reach them at a different level than just the I hate to say outdated programs of ANNA, but they were really great when they started with, though I think that the approach to really trying to talk about the feelings and the negative behaviors it causes branched out to just regurgitating war stories. And I hate to say it that way, but that is why I began this journey to show not just that, but how many of the, not my just myself, but those that were part of my books now going into the fifth, of their approach to finding their own way out, and having all these different voices and stories and ways that work for one and not for the other is so important.
it it really is, to talk about the different ways, because that is something that's ingrained in society. When you talk about going sober, everyone's like, "Oh, you did AA or you did NA?" No. Well, how'd you do it then? There's other ways. Like, you don't have to do it that way. And then there's people that meet that with, "Well, then you're not really sober." It's like, what? How do you know? What are you putting these labels on me for? Like, do I partake in this? No. Okay, that's enough. Like, you don't have to have these things. And one thing that you talked about there that I think is something that we're seeing completely across the board when it comes to talking about addiction or substance use, misuse, um, and escapism in general really is the mental health,
Mhm.
where we used to look at it like addiction, what you're using is the cause of all of this mental health. And what we're really finding is that it's a symptom, is that it's not actually the cause. And after you, let's say, give it up for a period of time, if you don't address the underlying, then there's going to be different ramifications in your life, whether you go back to what you were using before, find new ways of escaping, and other ways that keep you stuck in your life instead of moving forward and living your life. When you talk and bring about that mental health aspect, do you see the peer support specialists can kind of help move that forward? Or is it more trying to get the mental health community to open up more when it comes to addiction and substance use?
Honestly, I believe it's both. First, that the mental health community needs to be open to the fact that something needs to change, that what is there, the approach that's being used today, is obviously not working. This ever growing monster addiction needs something to battle it. And what is there right now is just not working. And the peer specialist, I believe, most people with substance abuse problems, as you said, it is the whatever drug or alcohol they're using is just, or food or sex or gambling. I mean, addiction is huge, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you put a label on it and say you're an addict and they only think of drugs and alcohol. Well, no. And it is that underlying mental health issue that until it is truly addressed and let go of, can you really move forward? And there is a big place that we can utilize peer specialists into our communities to create this space to put your arm around someone and say, I've been there too, and you can get out of this. You don't have to just stay caught in this trap of using, because as you can see, it's causing additional problems brought on by the addiction. And you haven't even gotten to the mental health problem of what created it in the first place.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you that it is a lot of both, right? It's a lot of empowering peers to go out and be able to provide these services, right? And then also like the mental health community opening up to different possibilities, different ways of doing things. And you find this in any field where people who've been doing it for a long time are like, no, this is the best way. Well, why? Because it's the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we try this way? No, because we haven't done it that way before and it's not the best way. Well, how do you know? How did we make advancements to get to this point? Somebody tried it at one point, right? So trying to get people to understand and open up and say, hmm, let's try it. We don't have to do it for everyone, but there's certain cases that we could try it and see what happens, because what's the worst that's going to happen? We're going to go back to doing it the way that we did before. Okay. Right. And I mean, that translates to life too, where we do something the same way. I'm not going to try it that way. Why not? Because I've never done it that way before. Okay. And it's the same thing. Like, just try it, because what's the worst that's going to happen? You can go back to doing it the way you were before. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So opening it up to peers and allowing different ways to talk to people, honestly, to help people to understand and not just try to check a box, it would go so far. That's one thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, is the check a box um when it comes to mental health. And it's like it it holds everybody back.
It truly does. You're absolutely right about that. And that check a box for these professionals that want to just write a script and take you from one addiction in many ways to another one is like, what are you accomplishing there? And there's many people that medication is the only way to to bring them out, but it feels to me, and from what I've watched over the last 5 years, is they just hook them into somewhere else and say, okay, you're better, you're on a MAT program, so you can just stay on that one forever, and at least you're not doing whatever was more negative in their mindset, but you're still not addressing the mental health problem that brought them to that thing in the first place. Now, obviously, there are many people that do need more intense mental health treatment, but the majority of people in addiction just need to be heard, just need to let that steam off their chest once and for all, and put it over there and leave it. In my book, I describe that as in the last time I walked out of jail at midnight after my third felony. I left my garbage bag full of clothes that I dragged out of jail with me right there, and all my troubles, and said, okay, I'm not going back to that old world. I'm going to figure out how to move forward. And it wasn't easy. I had no money. I had 3 felonies. I couldn't even get a decent job for 10 years because I had 3 felonies. And, so the struggle is real. And that struggle is, I think, where society's like, well, you've got 3 felonies and 10 years or 25 years in addiction. You can't overcome that. You can never be more than that addict. Well, that's baloney. Yes, you can.
Yeah. And when you tell people that their past is going to dictate their future, that where is the where is the benefit of changing in there, right?
Exactly. Especially to a child. I mean, so that is what I'm working on the most, is addressing the teens right here, right now, while they're still in their youth, before they waste years and years in addiction, adding more problems to whatever caused that in the first place, those negative feelings and negative behaviors already impacting their world. And only then, if we can address it and break this dysfunction right here and help them become the change the world needs, the role models, we just might be able to finally defeat this monster.
Absolutely. And that's where the knowledge comes in. That's where the passing it on and wanting to share your story. So you mentioned how you left your troubles behind and you were able to move forward, and it 10 years of struggle to get to a point where you had a decent job. At what point did you start to really look at yourself and understand that what I have, I'm proud of, and I want to share with other people so that they can be proud of themselves?
I started playing with the idea of writing my first book about that 10-11 year mark into my recovery. And it was right after I bought my house by myself, no help. um, on my 12-year sobriety anniversary, I signed the documents for my house, which really just, I was like, okay, great, I've pretty much overcome everything. I have a decent job now, working for a Fortune 500 company, bought myself a house, a car. What more can I do, right? I mean, I've proved that the past does not define the future. Was when I put paper to pen and a brace on my hand so I could write it out. And I spent a year and a half writing out my life journey to that place. And I realized in doing that, in seeing all the people that lives I touched and they touched mine and my own children, and that it would be beneficial to help. So again, I wrote my first book with a pseudonym T Rose because I never planned on writing another one. And I still had some fear of the old world that I was talking about and the repercussions that could come to me because of my status within that world. But I realized in once it was published and all the people it was touching, and they're like, but Rose, you only told us like how you came out of jail and you decided you wanted to change. Well, where's the rest of the story? I'm like, oh. So I was like, yeah, I can see that. And so I wrote the second book, which is Free to Recovery Plan. And it was really powerful as well. But I realized that the big trap, just one last high, which was the first book, was so powerful. And at first it was causing almost more pain than I had anticipated because it was so raw and just drew people in.
Mhm.
That I seen the true benefit of giving them the recovery plan that I walked, along with all those that put their arm around me and said, you can do this, would be beneficial. And so, you know, it was quite interesting. It's been about 10 years now since, I began that journey, where, I have now beginning to embark on a, God willing, I survive to next year, an NIH research grant to bring a new platform for peer specialists and patients from both sides of the desk platform as an academic behavioral format. And I'm super excited about it. And so may the higher powers above, shine their light on it.
So let's talk about that platform and the grant that you're looking to get. What is this platform that is is your baby that you're really bringing into this world that you're excited about?
Yeah. So it is with NIH and their mental health, drug abuse, different sections of their, this it's a huge corporation or government entity and such. And I hope to be able to use that as a structured format that can be documented for different communities through, the human health services department, health health and human services, DHS
Yep,
8. Okay. Sorry,
that's okay.
DHHS. And to use the state funded rehabs that they fund for, and utilize this as an additional platform within these rehabs to see how it works, to have a way to track it, to see its effectiveness. It would be the only way to really be able to break those barriers of what was to what could be. And it's only by testing it out and keeping the numbers your way against my way and see how it plays out. So yeah, I'm super excited.
That's awesome. I mean, it takes a lot of work to be able to break those barriers down and build a bridge, get people to understand um, the possibilities. It's really, really difficult when you're looking at how many people could be not just like positively affected by this, but how much it's going to touch them from a professional standpoint, right? And for you to have the fortitude to start and now you're in the, the middle, and, like as you said, hopefully see it to the end. It's something that could seem overwhelming, but after you see how your journey has played out and you see how much determination that you've had to get where you are now, probably at some point is like, it's just another thing here.
It has definitely been a journey. I at 50 began this, took my what little retirement savings I had to create my first business, to be able to publish these books and create the initial research, right, with my first two books, and a group therapy or group support dynamic on Facebook over 5 years, which really was the initial research pilot program to see if it would be effective, if it could really help, before I went and knocked on NIH's door of like, hey, look at me. I got a new idea that let's give it a try. Like you said, what can it hurt?
Yeah. And what is the your dream when it comes to being able to provide the post rehab care, or the post leaving, the initial um sobering up phase behind? What do you see that becoming?
That's an awesome question. So what I hope to be able to do is take initial set of trainees to understand the Quest program that I've created, and then take those trainees to train others, as well as those that'll be utilizing the program from first the patient side of the desk, and then working them back in over time as just support people um, in meetings, aftercare, at the local church, or wherever we can hold those meetings, and continue to grow that population of peer support with an academic format that's almost like, I mean, they're going to have to read, right? There's lessons to be done from both what the patients are going to be interacting in, as well as the peer specialists that we hope to train. But here's where the true dream is to be able to train these people and pay them to do this, to be part of the community, and the strengthening, the healing that it needs. Because, well, most of us, can't afford $300 an hour to go see some PhD that hasn't a clue what the heck I'm talking about, when I was huddled up against a wall in a raging hurricane, soaking wet, because I had nowhere to be, nowhere to live. I was hungry. I was clinging to this bottle of water that had this much left in it. I mean, they don't have a clue what that feels like. But our peer specialists sure will, because they've been there, done that
Yeah.
to the same degrees.
And that community, fosters that connection. And when you see, as you said, there'd be reading, and it is about doing the work. And when you're at the start and you see someone who has done the work and where they're at right now in their life, it it is that seed that plants that hope that, oh, if I do this, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but I could get to that point. And it gives someone a horizon that otherwise didn't have one before.
Absolutely does. So much hope. I mean, there was a day when I had just come out of a major seizure, and I was living near the water, much like what's behind me here. And in this in I was ready to just walk in there and say that was just done. And during my last time in rehab, I mean, in jail, there was a rehab program within the jail. And I truly just decided it was time to embrace something new, to figure out how to overcome all this trauma from my past and allow that seed to grow. And now wanting to help others plant their own seed within themselves to see the possibilities of brightness in their life, hope, confidence.
And that's when it becomes the most powerful. And you really see people start to make the strides is when they realize that their hope is coming from inside them. And then they have something to latch onto. When you latch onto that, that is when things take off and you start to see the steps being taken place. And I think that that's where a lot of the struggle is initially with, especially people you care about, right? Why can't they see the hope that I have for them? Why can't they see? When you are in it, you don't see what other people see, especially when you look in the mirror. You don't see what other people see when you're thinking about yourself because all you feel is that darkness and that void and that despair. And so when you realize that that hope is actually there, it's just this little flicker and you can start to grow it and you start to really embrace it. Like that is when you start to see things really start to happen in somebody's life. And it is about getting people to see it themselves. It can start with someone else, but when somebody sees it themselves, like you see the switch happen and it's like, wow.
And that's true. And that's very powerful. And I think one of the other one of the other things that holds a lot of people back from fully embracing recovery is the expectation of now I have to live up to what my family sees as where I should be, the failure that I've already had, and the expectations and the hope that I've already broken many times, at least for myself, and overcoming that stigma all on its own, forget all the rest of it, that family dynamic of the guilt that you weren't there for this and you weren't there for that, and the shame because wow, I didn't see my kids first step, right? Because I was too busy off in la la land. And that's really difficult to overcome for many people. And I do believe, which is part of the academic process on in the program that I'm trying to, bring to life here for the patient, is to give them the ability to put their academic, their intellectual stuff back together and read and conversate and problem solve. And I mean, that's a dynamic force and process that, well, for many years they haven't engaged in because they've been too wrapped up in self-destruction to think about any kind of thinking. And then they're sitting in rehab going, wow, in 30 days, I got to get me a job. And I haven't had a job in forever. And so putting their mind back to work, I think, is going to be a huge benefit for their own self-esteem more than anything else, for themselves, but also for their families to be able to see, wow, they might really be engaged this time and truly, truly want to be that person that we've always seen them being.
Yeah. And it's those expectations when you haven't built that foundation really are so heavy that it really does lead you to teeter, right? And you mentioned earlier that your first study was a Facebook group. What did you learn having that Facebook group that saw you be able to work with self-esteem to build a foundation so that those expectations weren't so heavy?
So when I wrote my first book and put it out there and gave away a lot of books to see what its dynamic would bring, part of the reason why I expediently wrote the second book was because a lot of them relapsed, even temporarily, because of the impact of them seeing their own shame and guilt there, and they hadn't
Yeah.
dealt with the underlying reasons they were an addict. Um, and it helped me to recognize there that, okay, now let's have these conversations. Let's empower each other. We're all in this together. We have so much more that is familiar or similar than we do opposites. And even though most of them would know that as truth anyways, they didn't realize that the way out was just as similar, but only in addressing um, or letting go of the familiar could they truly recover. And, it seems like such a simple concept, but it's not, because you get so latched on to, this is all I know how to deal with this pain. I'm going to just pound myself with whatever the substance or means is, that after it just becomes habitual, right? It just becomes
Yep.
automatic. There's no thought to it. It's just, okay, so my bottle of booze is almost empty. It's off to the store. I go if I have to crawl on hands and knees to get there to get me a new bottle.
Hmm. That really reminds me of, the phrase that I think a lot of people tell themselves is, if I want better, I have to be better. But what I've started to really say to people, changing one word in there that is more powerful, is if you want better, you have to do better,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the doing and the acting that allows you to be better. And before you do an act, there's nothing else that is there to be. It's just an expectation, and you let yourself down and you get back in the cycle. But as you start to do and you act on it, and you start to prove to yourself, oh, I can do this, and you build that confidence, that's when you can start to, okay, I wanted better and I'm being better. But the being comes from doing. And so having that do there really does, it changes people, the way people look at things, including myself. I use it for myself often, because it helps me to realize that I don't have to skip the middle and do everything at once.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually take one step at a time, and that'll get me to where I want to be. That is something that, just what you said there really brought me back to how with some clients I've used that. If they'll say, well, I want to be better. So, that I have to do something. It's like, well, if you want better, then you have to do better and start there, and that'll build.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And it is in that doing better that builds more confidence to do even more, even with the setbacks. Like I said, having to wait 10 years before I could get a job where, I could run a cash register or work from home taking people's credit cards, or any other of the dynamics where you have to have a criminal background check. Well, you the old saying, you do the crime, you got to do the time. Well, that's even working your way out. And it's possible by doing better. Every time you do a little better, well, they recognize that, even if they're not telling you they recognize it. But there will come a day when all those things that you were doing better, that next right thing, will
Mhm.
pay off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Michelle Rose, as we're kind of walking down towards the end, winding down this episode, if people want to look at your books, where would they be able to find them?
Well, all my books are listed or are accessible on Amazon. You can also go to Barnes and Noble and either order them there or go online and order them there. They are available at just about any book store platform globally, and as well as my website at Tiffy Rose, the numeric one, recovery.com. And I'd be, excited if you wanted to reach out to me as well at Rose at tiffyrose1recovery.com. As well as Facebook, I have my Facebook t.rose dash speaker to look at some of the work that I've done there as well.
That is awesome. That way people can find your books, they be able to keep up with you. I love all of that. So as we have talked a lot about recovery and peer support and helping people to find their hope, is there one message that you'd like to leave people with today?
The past does not define the future at all. You are so capable of overcoming whatever set you backwards or in that dark place. Just be strong for yourself and you will find your way forward.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, this has been the Untapped Keg podcast where we look at different perspectives of sobriety and mental health so that you can take something, implement it into your own life. Go to untappedkeg.com if you'd like to be on the show. There's a new form that you can fill out to be able to come on. Or if you want to look into maybe some coaching services or some resources that you would be able to benefit from that don't cost anything. Again, that's untappedkeg.com. So let's be better tomorrow than we were today, because at least we don't make it, we tried. I love you.
Amen.